Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are here from Booksource live in our St. Louis office and very excited to be talking to you today about starting your classroom library. As soon as we can get our slideshow connected.
Can you use the mouse to click on the presentation?
Perfect, thank you. I'm Stephanie Schwab. I'm here with Brandy Ivester and Rachel Bailey, and we will be hosting today's Starting a Classroom Library. I am a former educator, spent more than 12 years in the classroom, first with the young kids, and then stayed home with my own two for a few years and went back and did middle school English language arts most recently, which I absolutely love. And my favorite part about teaching is partnering with students to find the right books that spark their love of reading. And I'm going to let Brandy and Rachel introduce themselves.
Hello, I am Brandy Ivester, and I work in our collection development department. We're kind of the in-house librarians here. I've worked at Booksource 8 years, and I've had over 10 years of experience just in the book industry and library industries. I do have a master's degree in library science, and I just love reading and helping to connect readers with the books that they're looking for.
I'm Rachel Bailey. I work in our customer care and digital products departments here at Booksource. So everything from helping people place orders for their classroom libraries to helping you manage our own online library checkout system, which you'll hear more about later. Other than I come from a family full of teachers. My sister teaches 3rd grade here in St. Louis, and I am just a big book nerd. I love books, and I also love animals. So my dog has a literary name.
Ooh, those are the best.
Thank you, ladies. So today during our Starting a Classroom Library webinar, we are going to talk to you a little bit about how classroom libraries can help boost reading achievement and really overall academic achievement. We're going to talk about an overview, the types of books, what kind of books should you be looking to include in your classroom library, and ideas for literally designing the space in your classroom for your library. And then we're going to take a look at Booksource Classroom. Rachel's going to give us an overview of that, a free tool to help you keep your library and your books organized. There will be an opportunity for some Q&A. So after we wrap up the presentation portion, we will open it up for questions. However, anytime along the way, if you have a question, you can open the chat box and send it on over. And if we don't address it by the end, we will get to all of your questions. So please don't be shy. Feel free to jump on in. Here at Booksource, for those that aren't familiar with us yet, we are a provider of books for the education market, the education industry. We sell from pre-K to 12, and really what sets us apart is that we are here all about customer need. So customers will come to us and say, these are how many books I need, here's my budget, here's the grade levels that I work with, the levels that I need, and the curriculum topics or the interest topics that I need. And we will go through our thousands of titles and create a custom list for you. We also have an amazing team behind the scenes called Collection Development you'll learn more about, and they create the collections that we have available on our website and in our catalogs, again, based around customer need, and those are customizable as well. And we're very excited to share lots of information with you today. We're going to start at the very basics in the beginning. Why classroom libraries? We're not going to bore you with all of the research. There's plenty of it out there available. If you Google why classroom libraries, you are going to come up with a myriad of things. But most importantly, bottom line is academic achievement and reading achievement. We want kids to be successful. And the research time and again has these consistent messages of kids need to be provided time to read, access to books that are appropriate for them and their grade level, and then the choice, self-selected choice of what they want to be reading. So this in a nutshell is what the research provides. Starting with time, there is a definite correlation between the time that kids spend independently reading and that academic and reading achievement. And you're not misreading. The 20th percentile kids read 0.7 minutes a day. And this is information from Donna Lynn Millard's Reading in the Wild, which is an excellent book. And if kids go up to reading just 14 minutes a day, so less than 15 minutes, you can message it to your kids. Yes. And that sounds like a doable chunk. Yeah. Then they're going to jump all the way up to the 80th percentile. So that is quite a jump in achievement for kids with not a lot of overwhelming effort that's required on the front end. And it doesn't have to be a sprint. They can work their way up. If they're reading less than a minute, they can build up over time.
5 minutes, do 8 minutes, and just work right up.
Exactly. Slow roll up. With the ideas of access and choice, there's a wonderful principal, James Payne, at Literary Point Elementary School, which is in Georgia, and he was kind enough to write this amazing post for our blog talking about their experience integrating classroom libraries and the achievement and success that they found using them. And he said that they had double-digit gains for the students once they had access to classroom libraries. So they went above and beyond their grade level reading once they started integrating these and using books on a daily basis in their classroom, which is amazing. And they're beautiful too. Here is some of their faculty during some PD time. And really the keywords just jump out again. They provided the kids access to books without them having to leave to go to a school library or media center. And really they had that goal of, we truly want to create lifelong readers. And they knew that one way of doing that was to make sure they had self-selected, so the choice, and then access through the classroom libraries. So it really does perfectly illustrate all of these things. We have links to this blog post if you want to read more about it, or if you feel it's important to share it with your administrator if you're trying to build a culture of literacy within your building or district. Here at Booksource, we're very big on what's best for students. At the end of the day, that's why we're all here. We want students to be successful and to achieve. And our mission is to create inspired readers, and we want to be in a world where every child loves to read. And we created a word cloud full of some of the most common things that we hear come up over and over as we talk about books on a regular basis here at work. I love this classroom library continuum because it really very nicely demonstrates the different ways that books can be used from a classroom library in the classroom setting. So maybe you're not doing a workshop style, maybe you're teaching with a basal, maybe you are somewhere in between on that spectrum. This classroom library continuum will show you how you can slowly start to integrate those books. Again, you're proving that this is a valuable investment and it will have multi-purpose within the room, not simply my kids are going to read for their 15-minute independent reading time a day, which is fantastic. And if that's where you're starting, great. Maybe you're selecting books off the shelf to do a read aloud, and that's okay too. You can see some of these other areas. Author and genre studies are a great way to really inspire kids and get them engaged. There are a ton of authors with amazing websites, and they'll do these type of Zoom webinar sessions with classes. They'll come for school visits. They have great websites where you can just learn more information, and it really helps the kids put the face behind the book, which is very engaging. As we all know, when there's a human on the other side, it makes a huge difference. Getting started, the basics, where do I even begin? So great question. How many books should I even have in my classroom library? The short answer is my absolute favorite, and as a personal book hoarder, I can relate. There's no such thing as too many books. We could end it there, but for this purpose, we'll say in a classroom library.
I think if it's books, it's not hoarding. Right?
Right. It doesn't even count. Just keep buying shelves. Fontes and Pinnell have a basic guideline of 300 to 600 books in your classroom library. If you kind of think about the grade level, those younger kids, when they're first learning to read, the kindergarten first graders, they are consuming books very quickly, going through them very quickly. As they get a little older, the chapter books, not quite as often are they turning over and starting a new book.
To read A Very Hungry Caterpillar is much quicker than to stop and read, that 7th Harry Potter book. So
absolutely, yes.
One takes longer. So
they do.
More books.
2 of my favorites. So, and then we also have ILA, who, as you can see here, when they created their quote, they were the International Reading Association. They've upgraded to include all literacy now, and they suggest about 7 books per child, and then with the 4 plan of adding 2 new books every year. This is just a general guideline. Really, any place you can start is only going to start benefiting your kids. What types of books should you include? And really, a great mix is key. You want to make sure you have a variety, something that is going to appeal to every kid. It is just going to jump off the shelf, and some kid is going to walk in your room and go, that one, I want to read it. I can't go another second without it. You need to have a bunch of different types of literary genres. You've got your realistic fiction, fantasy. Personally, with the nonfiction titles, I love biographies and autobiographies.
I'm a science kid all the way through.
All the way. I mean, a good volcano book or something about space, and I'm all in too. So we have a great variety of some different suggestions here for everybody to choose from. And then text features are great. These are an awesome way for kids that really they're learning without even really realizing it. You can consume so much information by learning to read a graph and finding and navigating your way through glossary, just awesome life skills that are really going to benefit them in the long run. Some other examples here, I'm a huge proponent of graphic novels. Sometimes they get a bad rap, and I think it's just that people aren't educated enough to understand necessarily. They see them as a comic book and not the true literary benefits that they bring to the classroom about inferencing and all of these things.
I think over like probably the last 5 years, I mean, it started before that, but over the last 5 years, that whole format has really come into its own, and you will have biographies that are graphic novels. You'll have nonfiction science, just an entire plethora of great graphic novels are out there now.
Absolutely, and they're for all ages, gender, they don't discriminate.
No.
They're across, there are even some for very little kids.
Birth
so
to death, we can find a graphic novel.
we will
for
find
you.
the right one for your kids. Obviously, picture books and novels, and then I joked earlier, and I mean it, I could do a whole separate webinar on picture books even for middle and high schoolers. I absolutely love using them. We use them here in meetings. Great way to start a faculty meeting is with a picture book read aloud. Everybody loves to be read aloud too. You don't have to admit it, but
I do.
what else do you need to think about? This is super important, and I'm going to take a second to brag on our collection development department, which is Brandy's team. We know that inclusiveness and diversity is really out there today, as well it should be. Something that for a long time we could have done a better job of messaging and bragging about ourselves a little bit, not even bragging, just saying here's our process so that everyone is aware. Our collection development team has been what I like to call consciously thoughtful of including these types of diverse titles in our collections and just in the titles that we carry in general, so that every child truly has something that they're either relating to, and it is that representation of, oh, I see myself in this book, or the converse is, I've never met anyone that lives in Africa before, and I'd really like to learn more about that. So it is that real windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors approach to things that, yes, it is something that is very out there and people are talking about it right now. They've been consciously thoughtful for a long time, and these on the screen are just a small representation of the things to consider.
We're always looking for ways to even get better and better at
Absolutely.
this and at other book metadata.
Absolutely. And so we're going to expand more on both of these. Brady's going to talk about their process, and then Rachel's going to talk about a way that you might be looking at the handful of books that you have in your library right now, or even a selection that you're considering to start your classroom library, and you might be wondering, well, did I hit on these things or not? We're going to help you with the tool for that. Up to date and new titles. We all have a little bit of shiny new object syndrome to us. So if we've read something, yes, I'm not a rereader personally, unless it's a picture book. Once I read a chapter book, I already know what happens. The suspense is gone for me. I need a shiny new object. I know I might be alone and on an island with that, and that's okay, but you will have kids that are on both ends where they're like, I want to read this book 5 times this year, and others that say, I read it once and I'm finished. Thank you very much. I'm on to the next. Really, if kind of a general guideline, if it's been published within the past 5 years, it's a great thing to include in your classroom library. That is not a knock on classics. They have a place too, but as you're starting and growing, it's better that you want to see, and you're going to get more buy-in, and as district and administrative personnel are coming by and actually seeing the kids interact with those classroom library books, there's going to be a lot higher chance. On the other hand, if there are some classics that are just absolutely beloved, still really resonate with the kids and they're very relevant, make sure to include those as well, because there is something about familiarity, especially with those younger kids, being drawn to that, ooh, you know, my dad used to have me sit on his lap and we would read Hungry Caterpillar together, will be something that will really resonate with them. It's okay to cycle in and out if you are running out of space. This is valuable real estate on your shelves. So make sure that you're filling it up with books that the kids are actually wanting to read. It's also okay to have more than one copy of a title. If everybody wants to read Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Harry Potter, or insert your favorite series or book here, then it's okay to have more than one copy, because then they could be talking about it and interacting and creating even more buzz.
One of them will get worn out.
Absolutely. And that's okay too.
As they should be.
That's okay too. And then really keeping up to date, especially on that nonfiction, especially with the who is / who was. sometimes people pass away and it is a who is, and that's become out of date. One day
Stanley was one.
Stanley is one.
We used to have Who is Stanley, and it was reissued as Who was Stanley.
And that is a very recent example that many of your kids will relate to. As for us adults, 1 minute eggs are bad for us and bad cholesterol. The next minute they're a good fat and you should eat all the eggs that you want. So we try to keep up to date on all of these things and trade books, real books as we call them, authentic books. These are a great way to stay relevant and up to date. And then please don't forget about cross-curricular opportunities. There's a couple of things here. Something that we as educators know are consistent pain points: time and money. What is a way that I can incorporate reading, ELA, writing into all of my day and get the most bang for my buck with the books and my budget is to incorporate cross-curricular. Also, if you look at some of these topics, these are things that kids go crazy about. They absolutely love STEM subjects. Yes, there are books about math and math subjects. Geography, I want to learn about the world. Art, let me see and learn some history through art. Financial awareness and financial intelligence, and all of that is really becoming more and more popular. Government and civics, hot topic. They're going to be seeing these current topics on TV, hearing about them on the radio and the news, and learning about them online, then help them create some context. And then social emotional learning is also something that we believe can be interwoven throughout your entire day. So it's a great thing to think about when you're including those books is, how many different ways can I use these books and just really stretch my investment? And these are some great ways to do it. The big question, always, funding. Where am I going to get the money for this? And that's a great and very valid question.
Very practical realities. You have to
yes, it is.
Somehow. Yeah.
And so Title I and Title III money are great funding opportunities if you are in an area that is eligible for those funding. Look for literary grants and literacy grants. We partner with and are big supporters of Book Love Foundation. So check out Book Love. It is a fantastic opportunity to start and grow your classroom library. And then really, ultimately, what you can do is to educate building-wide, district-wide, and build that culture of literacy where everybody is bought in. The kids see all adults across the building reading, sharing books with kids, and that's where, you know, again, you can go back to the research and help provide things that show that it has value and will just help academic achievement throughout the building. So now I'm going to turn over to Brandy, and she's going to get to the heart and soul, which are the actual books in the classroom library.
All right. Well, I'm glad everyone's here today. I'm Brandy Ivestorp, as I said before, and I work on the collection development department. It is not just me. There is a team of people, and you can see them on the screen now. And between the 5 of us, we have over 70 years in the book and publishing and library industries. And we like to say we are a small team, but mighty. And I'm very, very privileged to be able to bring my years of experience to this team and to help be able to connect readers with the books that they need. So where to even begin? I know this can be a daunting task. A well-rounded classroom library should really be more than just a big old pile of books. I mean, how do you use that? So over the years, I have gathered some tips and some advice that I'd love to share with you that maybe will help you know where to begin, what sort of things to include, and what to do if you are just too overwhelmed. And I assure you, everyone has been there that has built a classroom library. I've been there so many times myself. Less so now that I have this much experience, but when first starting out, it was a lot to take on. So see if I can help with some of this. So diversity inclusion, as Stephanie touched on earlier, it is incredibly important. For as long as I've worked at Booksource, we've at least been keeping track of which books do have some inclusive themes so we can be sure to include them. But we really, really upped our game on that probably 4 or 5 years ago. And we got very purposeful with just making sure we were selecting books that weren't reinforcing stereotypes, that had a diverse amount of diversity. It's beyond just cultural. And then just stepping back and making sure that it's still a well-rounded group of books at the end of the day, and that they're interesting to kids and that'll be something that they can relate to. You know, to put it kind of bluntly, I think Narnia and Oz has a bit of a diversity problem. So we are doing our best to try to increase diversity in all aspects of everything that we offer. And so we do try to focus on own voices authors, which was coined by Karen Dubas. This means that the book was written by an author that has some kind of connection to the content or the characters they are writing about. I think everyone can tell their own story better than someone else can tell their story. So whenever you're able, I do recommend connecting with own voices authors and including those books in your classroom. The other books are lovely to include too, but sometimes it can really veer into tokenism and stereotypes. And then, like as I said, just in all genres, fantasy and sci-fi are notoriously lacking of diversity. It is getting better. Like every publishing season that goes by, it gets a little bit better, and it's getting almost leaps and bounds better this year. So I think it'll be easier moving forward, but I do want to acknowledge it will be more difficult in some areas than others. And just again, we all know what the stereotypes are. Just seek to not reinforce them. So if you get a group of books together and you stop and you look, and all of the books you have that feature a certain type of character are telling a single story, maybe it's time to include some other options in there. Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi has a great TED Talk on the danger of a single story, and I recommend just Googling that and watching it because it's excellent. And also remember, diversity and inclusion applies to many traits out there. Also make sure your titles are engaging and up to date. You really want to meet kids where they're at. It's a secret between all of us. Please don't tell my mom, but I did cut the Little House on the Prairie series set from one of our catalogs because we just had to make room for something that was a little newer and more up to date. And that book is still accessible. People can still buy it from us, but we felt the time to advertise it had passed because we really wanted to bring attention to newer titles or even some classics that weren't getting that same attention. And choice does make all of the difference. So even beyond diversity, just making sure you have a variety of topics included. So we mentioned science earlier, and you're like having your head, I need 30 science books. And if you're not paying attention, it's really easy to get all animal books and have nothing about simple machines or volcanoes or space. Yeah, like every single topic has such variety within it that as you're starting to piece your library together, just make sure students are varied and unique, and you would like the library to be as varied and unique as what they are.
I could read 30 books about dogs in a row.
So
not everyone can.
Exactly. And if you really don't know where to go, invite your students to offer suggestions to you of what kind of books they're looking for. 'Cause even having choice in that selection, they'll be even more invested in their library. Nonfiction does become obsolete a little more quickly than fiction. Is Pluto a planet? Is it not a planet? I know. Many years ago when I first started, we carried this book about the golden Panama frogs and was just determining if we could save them, and they were on the brink of extinction. And since then they have went extinct in the wild, so we had to remove that book from our collection because it's no longer up to date, it's no longer relevant. So we had to let it go.
It turns out, unfortunately, we could
not. We got the answer to that book, and they are still in zoos being bred there, so they're not extinct from the world, but they are believed to be extinct in the wild. I know. Newer copyrights are a great place to start. It is not a cure-all by any means, but having something a little newer is a really good step towards having things that will connect with students, have accurate information. And then also, don't be afraid to weed things out of your library that don't belong. Maybe before you weed it out, if it's one you feel is appropriate and should be included, try doing a couple little mini book talks with it. But if at that point still no one is checking it out, you don't have any use for it, it's not really a book anymore. It's just an object in your room taking up space. So pass it on to someone who will enjoy it. If it's in really rough condition, I give you permission to recycle it. It's okay.
And it's not personal.
No.
Sometimes kids just don't resonate with the same books that we love.
It happens. I
that's
loved
okay.
that Brian Jake series when I was a kid, Redwall, and it doesn't get read as much as I wish it did these days.
It's not personal.
It's not, and I do look at it, it's problematic in a few ways, but I do, it's okay. We have to let some of our favorites go because these are the readers today, are the students.
Yes, make room for new favorites.
And so I want to go over Booksource's starter classroom libraries. I'm not saying you have to mimic these exactly or get them as is, but I found these to be a very good guide when piecing together other libraries. Again, it's overwhelming. Just pick out 300 books for third graders, go, and oh my gosh, what do you pick out? Yeah. So what we did when we started this project at Booksource, I was much younger in my career, and I personally was very overwhelmed, and I had no idea where to go. So a couple of my mentors at the time helped me break it apart into these sections, and then we could pick a few books for each one of these. So I recommend looking at your classroom, at the lessons you're teaching, at your students, at what the school overall is doing, and maybe like use this as a starting point and adapt it to fit whatever you need to support your efforts there. I really, like, this is a great guide. Later when we started on, we did kindergarten through 8th grade, and more recently we added a preschool component, and what works in 7th grade doesn't work in preschool, so I was able to adapt the older kids one and remove some of the harder content. They're not really doing historical fiction so much in preschool, but we had a really lovely imagination and a read aloud section, because it's just different. So really think about what your kids are doing and what sort of books you need to support that. And again, even this can be overwhelming. So if you want to start somewhere smaller within it, I recommend just thinking about 50 books you might want instead of 600 or 300 or as many will fit, because I get it, it's overwhelming. But 50 books isn't as big to think about. So you can include a few favorites, some new books, some series, and get a nice cross section. And then when you are either financially or mentally and emotionally prepared to go back at it, you could add 50 more books and just piece it together as works in your life, because everyone has things going on and can't always take the time and have the resources to do this all at once.
Exactly.
And again, each grade's needs are very uniquely considered whenever we do this. And so I do recommend whenever you're piecing together your own library, if you're able, really get involved and think about, do you need more read aloud options? How much text do you really want to introduce? Again, when I was much, much younger in my library days, I read aloud Horton Hears a Who to a group of 2 to 3-year-olds, and that's a 45-minute read aloud. So
that's a tough sell.
I know. I never did that again, and I learned I could turn 5 pages all at once.
You're gonna hit the highlights today, kids.
I did all that and learned moving forward. And were I making a preschool library and had that experience, I believe that book would have been gifted to the kindergarten or 1st grade teacher, and I would have found something with a few less words on the page for that. So really, like, what works in one class won't necessarily work in another.
Sure.
I also want to spend a moment speaking about our leveled classroom libraries. The first thing I want to say is not everything needs to be leveled. I really think there are some very rich, wonderful books out there that have not been leveled, things that are too new to be leveled, some things that are just so unique in format that they don't necessarily fit well into the leveling schema. There's many books out there now which will have a regular chapter, a graphic novel chapter, some poetry chapters, some will look like newspaper clippings, and level systems don't handle those really well, but there's still these rich experience for students to be able to interact with. So that's my first little leveling note there, but they really don't have to all be leveled. And when I first started here, our leveled libraries were just arranged by level, and we didn't really do much else with them. And we realized that really wasn't good curation. We wanted to help ensure we had a variety of genres and subjects included. We wanted to make sure we had some fiction and nonfiction balance brought to it. So what we did was we went and we divided it into subsections like historical fiction, realistic fiction, informational text, poetry, biographies, and then did a level range within. I will say one project I was working on recently with leveled, and it was around level O-ish, and got my historical fiction list all put together, and I'm so happy with it. And then I stopped and I took a step back, and of the 20 books I picked out, 18 of them were dog books. Rachel, I would have loved that. For some reason, level O has a lot of dog books. So I took a step back, took a breath, got some coffee, came back, and made that a little more diverse, because we could read about dogs all day, but that is not that won't reach as many
We'll see
students.
everyone's experience.
No. So always good to do. And if these level libraries, again, if it's too overwhelming, you can piecemeal it together. Pick out 10 from some levels you think you might need and or file those with your other books. Either pick out some 10 best-selling favorites or some new level things. And there's people here that can help you with that. And then again, just having that nice cross-section of topics and such. And before I leave you, one thing I would like to mention is if you're worried and just so worried you might pick out the wrong books or not get the right everything, it's okay, it's just books. You can get rid of one and get another one. You don't have to do this perfectly the first time. It's trial and error. One time I made a whole preschool class cry because they hated the read aloud I did. And I know, and I won't say what book it was, but I've not used that book moving forward because I had such potent feedback that it was not meeting students where they were at. But now that you have these ideas of how to start forming your classroom library, what are you going to do with all of these? I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie, who has some ideas for us.
Great question. How should you set up your classroom library? And I want to take a second to remind you, if you have any questions, we do have a chat open and it is being monitored. So go ahead and throw any questions in the chat box and we'll answer as many as we can once the presentation piece is completed. Again, recommended resources for putting together, like literally designing your space for your classroom library. There are so many resources out there. It would have been impossible for us to have covered all of them. So we just wanted to make sure that we passed along to you some of our favorite places. One of my favorites are other teachers. So if you are walking down the hall in your building, start peeking in the other classrooms to see what are they doing with their classroom libraries. If you have a PLC meeting and you're going into another building, check out their classroom libraries. Spying, yes, and healthy spying.
Ask them if you can take pictures.
Absolutely. Get on if you know teachers in other cities, teachers in other districts, then yes, asking them, hey, what does your classroom library look like? Other teachers are, as we all know, basically your guiding resource, the greatest resource that we all have. Social media is an excellent place, particularly Pinterest, which has the pictures and links and just fantastic ideas, and people are so creative, and I'm impressed
all day.
Every day. Get in the wormhole. And this is a fantastic book that's fairly recent. I believe it was published last year. It's all about the books. It has beautiful pictures of classroom libraries that are real pictures and very recent. Also lots of great suggestions for storage and labeling and organizing, and it is a fantastic resource. I like looking online as much as the next person, but having a physical book to hold and actually flip through, there's just something about that that just will speak to my soul forever. So that is a fantastic resource. Creating a classroom library is an awesome post on Reading Rockets. When you do get the slides after the webinar has concluded, it will be the next couple days, you can click through this link and it will have many tips and tricks on setting up your library. We have a free access to our Banter blog posts, and we have a couple of notable, we have lots of organizing posts, but a couple of notable ones are managing a carefully curated classroom library, and then 10 clever classroom library hacks, and who doesn't love a good life hack? So these are some great tips and tricks for the literal setting up of how am I going to organize them? What do I want this experience to be? And again, once in a couple of days when the slides and links are emailed out, then you will also be able to download some free resources that we have, and one of them are some bin labels, and you can download them and print them onto sticker paper if you want to stick them directly on a bin or basket, or you can laminate them and apply them. And we'll get to some of the other resources that are included later. I love these. We have a current $500 book giveaway going on social media right now, and it ends Monday, September 23rd. You upload your picture, tell us a little bit about your classroom library, and you can enter on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you're not already interacting with us on social media, Twitter is probably the easiest way to find us to enter. And these are some submissions that we've gotten just this week for our contest. And what I love about these is that they're colorful. You can also look, if you look across, if you kind of use the stool for reference versus the lamp, you can see that the literal accessibility of the books, that it is for a lower grade level on the one side that has the stools in the picture, and then it is a high school classroom where it has the lamp on the far side. And you can see just literally the height of the students and accessibility of the book. So that's something to consider. I want to make sure that my kids can get to the books.
And it's so important because the first law of library science is that books are for use. And if the kids can't physically get to them, they're not being used.
They can't use them.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So again, we have some suggestions for organizing by genre, and there are some genre suggestions. Here are a few more submissions that are just beautifully done. On the one side, it might appear that they are actually organized by level. However, they're organized by author last name, which is great and makes it really easy for the kids. Again, engages the author, the human behind the text. And in the middle, this educator, I absolutely adore that they have featured certain titles and then given a synopsis to really capture and engage the kids' interest. So they are featuring some titles, and I'm guessing they change them out every so often, which is awesome. And then the other, just these are just a great shelf and great display for the high school 12th graders. So we've gotten some awesome entries. Please head on over and enter. It's $500 worth of books, and who's going to turn that down? So head on over and enter to win. And now that I have made this amazing investment and I have all of these books and they are set up in my classroom, Rachel, what are we going to do with them?
So that is the big question. It is, how do you keep track of all those books? We know just from research and from feedback we hear all the time, about 10% of your library is going to get lost every year, whether that's sometimes they walk away with someone, or sometimes books have a shelf life and they can fall apart, or they can even just get not stolen but lost.
As someone who may have helped a few books walk away from my classrooms when I was a student, I will say those kids probably really needed that book if they took it.
What's the first rule of library science?
Books are for use.
Exactly.
So.
But since we know that that's going to happen, that's part of what you have to kind of accept. We at Booksource know that that's also a struggle because you've invested a lot of time and effort and money into these books. You individually as a teacher, your school, your district, that's a lot of effort to put this library together. We want to help you make the most of it. So we have developed an online tool, our free online resource, 100% free. It is called Booksource Classroom, the artist formerly known as Classroom Organizer. It's the new and improved version. It's gotten a nice update, and we've really tried to beef up the resource aspect of this. So it's our free online library inventory tool. You can add all your books and all your students in there and use it as a library managing system. So you can inventory your library. You can keep track of who checks books out and if they maybe are trying to walk away with them. Brandy.
I mean,
you can also, when you
or just know you need to replace that one.
Exactly. But when you put those books in, you can also even get as detailed as setting up those custom tags, tagging your books where they are, like all of those really awesome examples that we've gotten. I love scrolling through the pictures of the library. You can create locations and say, these books are in this location. I have mine in color-coded shelves. Ooh. I love a color code. But you can track those things about your books. You can also track all of that information that our collection development team has put together on those books. That's included in there as well. So you get the official leveling information, the publisher annotations, and those categories, that diversity piece. If it's tagged with certain categories, it'll tell you, which is awesome and so helpful when you're trying to figure out what these books are about, what's going on. You as a teacher don't have time to know every single book that comes out, and even in just 1 year. We're here to help kind of give you that resource, give you that leg up on creating this library. Then your students can go into your Booksource Classroom and they can check the books out. They can look up the information, they can check them out, return them on their due date, and they can even share ratings and reviews with each other. Word of mouth in that classroom is going to get your students more engaged. If they're writing reviews for each other and, oh, so-and-so gave this 5 stars, think of that level of engagement is awesome, gets them really excited to read and to share. And now the newest piece, which I think is the coolest thing we've done, is our library lens feature. So we've taken all of that information that our collection development team has put together, all of those categories we've been talking about. If you go through, you've got the size of your library. Is it a good split of fiction and nonfiction? What categories of diversity are you hitting? And our library lens tool will analyze your whole library and help you figure out where those gaps are. What categories are you maybe missing a lot? You really need to add some books about science because you don't have a whole lot. Or if you're just starting out, it'll tell you what maybe you want to identify as immediate needs. What are maybe some suggestions? We can recommend specific titles or specific Booksource collections that'll help you fill those gaps, make your library really robust for its size, give you the most bang for your buck, give you that really nice variety, that diversity of content, that inclusion, so you can find good books for every student. It's a little overwhelming.
It really can.
There's
It
a lot
really
going
is.
on here. What can we do?
The good news is if you're feeling overwhelmed now, or if you really start digging in the future, we can help. Booksource is all about offering support to educators. That's what we're here for. We have a whole team. Yes, behind the scenes, our collection development team is vetting every title that we carry, creating our collections for our catalog and website. And then you might not find exactly what you need in those offerings, and that's okay. We have an entire team dedicated to customizing based on our customers' needs. We have literacy account managers, and it is their responsibility to make sure that you are getting the most for your budget and getting the books that you need for your classroom. You can reach them at literacy@booksource.com or through our 800 number. We have somebody assigned to every area of the country, so you will have someone specifically dedicated to your area, and they are great to work with. Again, at the conclusion of the webinar in the next few days, you're going to receive a link, and that link will have the replay of the webinar, and we'll have some great hyperlink things throughout that you will be able to click through. And then it's going to have this amazing Classroom Library Starter Toolkit. It includes a checklist, so it will cover some of the things that we talked about today. It's also going to include some things that we just didn't have time to get into because there is so much. So covering the basics and making sure that the basis is covered, we'll have this great starter checklist. There are, again, the printable bin labels that we referred to before. You can print them on sticker paper, you can print them in, laminate them, and then there will be some beautiful, colorful, fun student bookmarks that you can print and, again, laminate or have available for the kids in the room.
But don't print those on the sticker paper.
Please don't.
That would probably be bad.
If you are a little bit farther in the process or just already thinking ahead and you're ready for a refresh of your classroom library, we have another webinar coming up Thursday, October 3rd at 4:30 Eastern and 3:30 Central. That is just that, refreshing a classroom library. It will be much the same format where you will get tips and tricks and then a little bit further suggestion on how do I even begin and then implement this refresh of my classroom library. We do have some questions. How do we use the scanner? Which goes back to, we came up with a few questions of kind of what do we most commonly hear from our customers? And one of them, Rachel, I'm going to turn to you.
Sure.
How do I get books into my classroom, Booksource Classroom account?
I hear this question all the time. That is the hardest part. If you
Is
already
it magic?
No, I wish.
Not,
I wish
not
it
quite.
was. That is the most labor-intensive part of setting up your Booksource Classroom, is getting all those books in there, because there's not a magic way to just make them all appear. But there are a few ways. There's lots of ways you can do it. It just takes a little effort. So if you bought books from us at Booksource, it's really easy. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, but it is the easiest way. But you can just import that Booksource invoice right into your library. If you have a list of all the ISBN numbers for some reason, if you're a data nerd like me, and you
That's how
have
I
all
have
the
my ISBN.
exactly, if you have all of those, you can dump those in as well. Or you can scan your books to add them, whether that's with a barcode scanner hooked up to your computer or with the app on an iPad or a smartphone. My sister, like I said earlier, teaches 3rd grade. She recently moved back to St. Louis and picked up all the hundreds of boxes of books in my parents' basement, and we went through and scanned all her books to add them to her classroom organizer. Her Booksource Classroom, the artist formerly known as. Right,
fantastic.
I knew I was going to do
That
it.
sounds like a great project to either have the kids help with or listen to an audio book while you scan
Absolutely.
through.
Lots of people will do their library day. Every kid gets the iPad in the classroom and a stack of 25 books, add them to. We've also heard teachers who only add the book to their library once someone wants to check it out. If they bring it to you and say, I'm ready to check this out, and it's not in there, you can scan it right there, add it right in. It's a little labor intensive. There's a lot of different avenues you can take, but the more you add those books in, the more information you get about your library.
And there are popular online retailers that offer many different things, and one of the things that they offer are USB scanners, about $15 to $20. I would probably not pay any more than $20. And that's shipping include all in 20 bucks. So you can go in, please be warned when you first plug it in, it will make a very shrill, high-pitched sound. That tells you that it's working and it's connected. So just forewarned.
And if you have an old cell phone, you could hook that up to Wi-Fi and use that too, so you don't have to let students have access to all your contact lists, just in case you don't want that to happen.
And Booksource Classroom will scan those ISBN barcodes that publishers put right on the back of the book. There's no need to create your own. None of that. It's just those publisher barcodes, and then all that data is already linked
Usually
up.
those are found right on the back side, either in the bottom corner, or sometimes they're up top.
Great. All right, we have another question. How do you choose titles to weed out? Should I keep classics even though my students don't read them?
So that is an excellent question, and I will admit it is difficult to weed things out. A big part of my role here is removing things from our collection overall. So, and it's things that customers aren't buying, or in this case, students aren't reading. And it's tough. Just because we love a book doesn't mean that, you know, the students love a book. One thing you can try before, because I feel like weeding is a last option, but it's a good option sometimes. Something you can do beforehand is to book talk the book. So just do like a quick 30-second book talk. This is not a classic, but I'll do an example of a book talk real quick. This is Stargazing by Jen Wang. And how I would book talk it to students is, this is a great story about two friends. One of them sees a magical world and the other one does not, and they work together to try to figure out what is real or not. It is heartbreaking and beautiful, and every page is just gorgeous. And you can even, if it's one that's a little more graphic, you can show some pictures of what the inside looks like and really get students engaged. But I do know, like, it can be hard to let go of those favorites. Like, one year, for many years, we had a level R horse stories set, and it never sold, and I just loved it so much. And then I had to realize this isn't what people are looking for. So we had to make room for what was in demand and what would connect with the readers.
And to connect with a popular book and Netflix series, we can say if it's not bringing joy to your classroom and your students, and it is just taking up real estate, it's time to let it go. And I wouldn't say you necessarily have to completely get rid of it. It might resonate with future year students. It might resonate with the other classroom across the hall. It just isn't worth taking up that valuable real estate on your space, your shelf at this time. Another question, the app, so the Booksource Classroom app looks different than my computer, the actual application on my computer. Rachel, can you explain the difference, please?
I sure can. It does look very different. So to give you kind of the background knowledge, way back in 2013, the app was developed, and it has not been touched much since. And it was initially created mostly for administrator teacher use, to scan those books into your library, to manage checkout if you needed to. The website is much prettier. It's much more user-friendly. I love it so much. The app is in line for a major update. I know we get questions all the time, so hopefully in the coming year or so, it'll look a lot more like the website, be much more robust and user-friendly. But we're getting the website to as good as it can be before we try to piecemeal the app.
This time, then the app is more practical just for scanning. So set up your account and do all of that
on the
entry and student entry on the website, and then use the app to simply add to the library. And then this is a great question, and we get this a lot. If your scanning app doesn't recognize a barcode, can that be remedied? And sometimes there are special print runs of books that are done. You might scan something and think, okay, I know that Booksource knows what this book is, and I know they obviously carry it, they have it, why is it not picking up? and adding and auto-populating this information. And there are a few reasons that might happen and a few ways to remedy that and to problem solve. But one reason it might happen is if it's a special print run, it might have been given a unique ISBN. So Rachel, do you want to expand on how they can remedy that?
So you can manually add titles as well. I don't know that I actually really explained that earlier. You can always manually type in a title and add it to your library, and even then go back and look up what the original ISBN of that title was and pop that in there. All that same data that's tied there will still come through. And if it's for some reason a title, whether that's older or a very specific print run that we don't have the data on, you can still add it into your library. It just won't have that data on the back end of it.
So like, for example, if I scan Harry Potter, and obviously we carry Harry Potter,
Right.
I could either go to booksource.com or some other online site, look up a common ISBN and use that.
Paste that right in there. You can edit anything in your library, whether you've scanned it, whether you've imported it straight through Booksource, whether you've added it manually, you can always go in and edit your titles.
That's awesome.
Great, thank you.
We've got another classroom question.
Another Booksource Classroom question. So should students use the website to check out books? Great question.
Yes, I definitely think the website is much more user-friendly. You can see the cover images. It's got a lot more color. There are little icons. The titles move when you click them, and you get a lot more of the information itself. If your students all have iPads in the classroom, because that's a thing, they absolutely can use the app. There's no rule against that. It'll work. You can check out and return on there right away. But the website's a lot prettier.
And so you encourage the students to do that checking in and out themselves?
Yes, I do. It depends on what grade. If you're in kindergarten and just trying to manage, you might be the librarian, or you might have a teacher aide be your librarian, and they're in charge of all the checkouts, and that works too. It's pretty customizable. You can make it work for your classroom.
And there is a kind of teacher world and student world, so you don't have to worry about the students getting in and accessing any personal information or any next level. All right, we have explain how to add passwords for student accounts.
Sure.
Speaking
So when
of
you
different worlds.
So when you do first sign into the website, you then select if you are the teacher or the students, and the students select themselves then from the list. You can then add an added security measure of those students having individual passwords after they've chosen their own name. Those you would add from the administrative side, but then your students can have their own individual passwords as well.
And then can students use the scanner to check out?
Yeah,
and
they can.
That's up to you.
It is, so if you've got a scanner hooked up to your computer, they can use it. They just use it more like a search tool. So it'll search for that book that they scanned and they hit the checkout button.
We hope that we're answering your questions.
I hope so, yeah.
We have some helpers that are furiously writing to help us. One thing that we have that is commonly asked that I'll throw out to the team is, how can I get the kids in my room to use and get excited about the books in my classroom library?
Do you recommend the little mini book talks? And if you have a few kids who really enjoy reading, have them talk to each other. And if, you know, little Timmy loved this book and he's comfortable with it, you don't want to put him on the spot, maybe he'd be willing to say 30 seconds about why he loved that book.
Like a show and tell, but on that book.
Exactly, or show and tell around books. So that can really be one avenue. And also just making sure there is exciting books for them to actually be excited about. You know, like personally for me, if you had a whole library full of sports books, I probably wouldn't read it. But throw in some gardening books, some fantasy, some sci-fi, then I'll find more things that I can connect to.
Yeah, I would say go on those author websites as well. That generates a lot of interest. If you have kids that are old enough to be reading the Sarah Weeks books like Pi. She has a fantastic website. She's very interactive. She encourages the students to email her, and she has great tips like in the subject line, please do not put in all caps, I need you to answer this question. My teacher said it's due tomorrow. So she has humor, she has great engagement, she has pictures that students have sent her. So I would say, I don't care what grade level it is, if it's younger kids, Pete the Cat, go on YouTube and find, they have all kinds of great videos. Older kids that we recommended earlier, we talked about the Who Was, Who Is, What Was series. They have a series on Netflix now. Definitely preview before you show in class, but it might be something you want to show snippets of to really get engagement going around those types of books. And also kids with different interests. They could have total opposite reading tastes. that might be a good indicator to them. I started this book, it really wasn't my favorite. You would love it because we have opposite tastes. It just generates a whole
all the time. I hated this book. You'll love it.
It generates a whole different kind of discussion, and also just that choice, really the choice, and displaying the books like we saw on one of the contest examples, and just showing really when you show that the books are beloved, that is contagious, and it just, reading is not a silent sport. It really takes, it is a community thing, and that's why we have book clubs even on through adults, because it really is a social activity. So if your independent reading time, kind of take a step back and really self-assess, is my independent reading time something that I am hard and fast that this is silent time and we are not talking in it? Then maybe build in, and again, you can build up it, maybe I'll build in 5 minutes where kids can talk about their books. They might read a part that's really exciting and they want to share that, and that will help generate interest. So, and then just keeping stock of those ones that, and you can use Booksource Classroom for this as well. I'm noticing these same 5 titles are consistently checked out, and kids, I hear them talking about waiting and how many more chapters you have in that one, and so go ahead, buy a couple more copies. So these are really, your students are going to be your biggest PR people for those books.
And if you and your students aren't comfortable giving little book talks at first, one thing you can look up either on YouTube or just put into your favorite search engine is book trailers. So say you want to encourage kids to read Girl Who Drank the Moon, put in Girl Who Drank the Moon book trailer. And often on those more popular titles, someone out there has made a book trailer, and maybe eventually your students will make their own.
Absolutely.
For each other.
Those are fun. We did get another question, suggestions for age-appropriate novels for 7th graders who are college-level readers.
Oh my gosh.
I had this back in the day, and it is a challenge because the age-appropriate material is quite different.
It is, just because you can read harder things. Sometimes that content is a little more mature.
You should be reading the content.
I don't have reading levels in front of me right now, but on booksource.com and other search engines, you can put in your interest level as 7th to 7th grade, and then put in the Lexile range that's more appropriate, or I would recommend Lexiles for this. So that college range is usually like 1,300 and up. So, gosh, I forget where Lexile tops out. I feel like maybe it's 1,800, but put in that range and that will bring those up there. And one thing I will say, as a kid who grew up as an advanced reader and often had, here's the next hardest book, here's the next hardest book, here's the next hardest book, it's okay to read candy every now and then.
A good book.
I love reading the occasional graphic novel that is so far below my level, but the story just touches me deeply. And often nonfiction will skew higher than what fiction does. You know, words like photosynthesis is a very difficult word. So, and they get even more complicated as you get into the higher grade domain-specific content. So you can look at nonfiction to help stretch those readers who need a challenge.
And reaching out to that literacy at booksource.com, we have the whole literacy account manager team who will make those book recommendations for you. If you find yourself a little stumped on the website or wanting very specific titles or collections, literacy at booksource.com, and let them know they are happy to help. They get very excited for those requests. When you are starting with no books as a brand new teacher, would you suggest just taking anything you can get your hands on to start? That is a great question and a difficult situation to be in.
I feel, because again, when you have nothing, you just want something. And I think what I would recommend is take a few of them, but examine them, because sometimes there's a reason. Some people are just generous, have too much, want to share, but sometimes there's a reason that these are at the thrift store or on a free pile. And I think the first lens I would look through some of the more dated books through is that diversity and inclusion lens. Is it so dated that perhaps it's become offensive? Because in that case, almost no book is better than one that does that sort of damage and sends those kind of messages. But I mean, sometimes it's just a lovely copy that someone had an extra, like brown bear, what do you see? And those are fine and have aged extremely well.
I would ask around, ask fellow teachers, do you have any that, you know, beloved titles that you're weeding out of your library? If you know anyone who has recently retired or transitioned in their career, that is another great resource. But you can also build a wish list. We do have that ability on booksource.com. You can build a wish list and then do a fundraiser or have the kids reach out. You know, they can ask their parents, grandparents, can I take in a few dollars that we can start building our classroom library? You can do different fundraisers and things to help generate that, or just really anything that you can suggest the titles out. Sometimes parents will be out and, might be at a place that they could buy a book and then send it in. So while, yes, it is great to have all of those free, hand-me-downs and pass-along books, just very carefully make sure that they're right for your students. Because again, if they're not going to use them, then we're back to square one.
And your public library can be a good temporary measure too, where you may not want to let students take home the books that you've personally checked out on your personal library card. It's still a good way of going and getting a few books to read aloud or use in the class for this one while you're working on getting the funds and building your library.
And then the last question that we had that we hear most often is, if I can only add 5 to 10 books right now, what do you recommend?
So many things. So one thing I do is, and part of it's just the world I live in, but I'm always hearing book recommendations, listening to blogs, reading newsletters. One great place to start is some of the ALA award lists out there. ILA has some great lists out there too. Right now, I'm very in love with stargazing. I love it so much. This is a 4th to 7th grade graphic novel. I feel like it could stretch down or up a little ways too. One of my favorite, oh my gosh, I can't believe it won the Newbery, but Girl Who Drank the Moon. It's a couple years old now, but I am a rereader, and this is probably the next book I'm rereading because it was just so touching. And I want to say this is like a 5th to 9th grade, but again, I feel like you could read aloud to 3rd graders. The words are a little too hard, but I think the story would just be very engaging to sit through.
And with that guided model of read aloud, they'll scaffold enough. They'll get it.
And as far as like keeping your nonfiction new, National Geographic, Kingfisher, DK, many of those very trusted nonfiction sources out there have some very low cost emergent readers. This particular one has a list price of $4.99, and it's a great book. It's going to last a while, and then whenever it wears out or becomes out of date, you could get another $4.99 book to replace it with. That's less expensive than some of these $20 hardcovers. One of the ones it's taking the world by storm. I already have a wait list for the second book that doesn't come out until December. Rachel, you know what's coming.
Yes, I do, because I'm on the wait list.
Oh my God, I think you're second. I'm first. You're second. Is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. It is an excellent Afrofuturism fantasy novel. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. I honestly think this one book, which is the first of a trilogy, gets more done than the entire Hunger Games trilogy. So all in one book.
Saying a lot.
I had to sit for a minute when I finished it. This is definitely a high school book. I would not stretch this one down at all. I would say this is 9th grade and up. Nothing is extremely objectionable, but there's just some things that are happening in it. Your middle schoolers are not.
There's some heavy content.
Yeah, they're just not ready for it yet. But I think it's okay to include these in high school because they're almost adults. They're going to be in this real world out on their own soon. And if they can't handle a book with a few issues in it, they will quit reading it. It's fine.
And there's a sequel coming soon.
So soon. It's supposed to be December. My favorite preschool book right now, and I included it when I updated the preschool collections, is called One Fox by Kate Reed. And it's a counting book with a fox and some chickens, and
it says it's a thriller, so
it
it's
is
a true crime lover.
I also think it would work really well if you're doing like predicting comp strategy lessons. I think the art is just lovely.
Beautiful.
We start with a fox. He has one eye, 2 sly eyes, and we're counting up. Oh my gosh, there's some chickens in here.
Got some great vocabulary. 5 snug eggs.
Oh my gosh, it's a great vocab builder. I am in love with this book, and keep an eye out for it in our upcoming catalogs.
My go-to always, I don't care if you're pre-K up to 12, are the Mo Willems pigeon books. Everyone can relate to that sassy pigeon one way or the other.
Pigeons going to school.
It has great nods to the original, and I can't recommend it enough. It's fun. I don't care what grade level you are. it's just fun read
Yes.
aloud, and they will be super engaged. I used to have my middle schoolers asking when I was going to bring another pigeon book in, so
Oh, that's so fun.
it was fun. All right,
We're getting the nod.
I think our time here is done. Thank you both so much for
Thank
such a fun
you.
afternoon. Thank you all for
Thank
joining us.
you.
And please be on the lookout for a link to the replay, your downloadables, and you have all this on the slides. You will have things that you can click through if you want further information. Again, literacy@booksource.com. You can call our 800 number. A live person will answer during office hours because we are a family-owned company, and we just appreciate your time. So be on the lookout for our coming next, the next in the series, which is Refreshing Your Classroom Library on Thursday, October 3rd. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Bye.